Well, oh my, you know what? I just realized my jingle's gone.
Your jingle's going to be gone.
Wow. So that'll be a relic. Hey everybody, welcome to the Advice Business Podcast. Kelsey, we have a new name. How exciting.
We do. I'm excited. Are you excited?
This is the inaugural new name episode. Is that correct?
It is. Yeah.
We're
Do you
rebranded.
like the new name? Do you like the music, listeners? Rebrand?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, oh my, you know what? I just realized my jingle's gone.
Your jingle's going to be gone.
Wow. So that'll be a relic. The other thing that will be a relic, hold on.
The sign which fell off the wall. If you're watching the YouTube version of this, Zach is holding up the old branded sign of Seeds Investor that has always hung behind him, or at least for the last year or so, that actually fell off on its own today when we were on a call earlier this morning. So that was interesting. It's like the sign heard us talking about it.
The sign is a sign. What is it a sign of? I guess it's just in support of this decision.
The sign was like, please, I've been waiting to jump off the wall. For months, I've been hearing you talk about your new branding.
Yeah.
We've just been talking, about it for so long with it right behind you.
Yeah, I think that's
Poor
actually
sign.
what I think it was trying to hurt me. Was the real situation. It was trying to smash into my back. Just missed me. So yeah, that is what's happening. New pod brand name, but also we are in sort of this emerging moment of a new, technically new company name in that no longer Seeds Investor, Seeds, and a bit of a brand update that I think we're going to talk a little bit about. So yeah, we're excited.
Well, and a fundraising announcement. So this is going to air a week after all of these announcements go out. So we are recording this ahead of them going out. But
we can tell the future.
So telling the future last week in the future was a big week. So
yes, it was.
What do you think about all these changes? As the founder of Seeds, maybe highlight just quick hit, rebrand, changing the podcast name as well. We've also raised money. Money is good. Maybe just talk about like what this means and why.
Let's see where to start. So I'll start with the rebrand. I think we've known now and have learned a lot over the last year plus. How important brand is, but specifically to our brand, what was really resonating through the brand and what wasn't to our prospective customer base. And it was missing, I think, we collectively determined it was kind of missing the mark in communicating what we're really trying to communicate as a company and as a product. And that's a big deal. We needed to really say the same things that we want to be saying through the product and in sales meetings and out in the world and talking to our customers. So I've always had an appreciation for brand, I would say. I think you would say, I'm quite annoying about it at times. And so I would say that, we knew this was kind of part of the plan as we got to this fundraise, which we'll talk about, and, kind of this new phase of the business in general. And as the product evolves, we needed the brand to kind of evolve with us. So yeah, I'm, I have a little bit of nostalgia for the sign that tried to kill me earlier today. And the previous logo, but I'm more excited about the fact that I think what we have now very much kind of tells the story we're trying to tell. So yeah, I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into kind of like the why behind the rebrand in more detail in terms of the specifics of what we're incorporating or kind of what the feedback was leading up to that in a little bit. But maybe we could share about the fundraise as well first and kind of talk about what this is going to enable for us at Seeds, because there's we're putting out a lot of information about this, but we wanted to just get on and talk about this as well in a more conversational format, just to kind of share, what led up to this and also, what are we planning for? What are we doing with this money? How are we spending this money, Zach?
How are we spending the money? Yeah, I think, in sort of seed stage for Seeds, we had the opportunity to really figure out who our customers are, what their pain points are, and how we can build a product that really addresses those issues. And of course, build a compelling business case for that. There's not just one possible customer. This is certain pain points that we've really seen across a big part of the wealth management space. So with that, we got where we could in that stage of the business to, the sort of glimmers of product market fit, right? How do you build something and start to deliver it to a customer base and get that initial feedback and iterate as quickly as possible, and then, get to the next phase. And so now we're in that next phase, which is fully bring that vision to life. Everything we've just learned for, months and months, how do you actually bring that to life in the product? And of course, how do you get in front of more and more customers and deliver that product and really just continue that flywheel at this point, right? This is still the phase of building, right? So a Series A where, the product vision is not fully complete. We're not growth stage kind of tacking on random features once in a while to try to, tap into new verticals. This is, completing the vision of the product and again, getting more and more customers to hopefully enjoy it. So in terms of resources, what that unlocks for us is really the ability to do the things I just said. And practically speaking, the way to get there is we need to move the product as quickly as possible. So that means more engineering resources. It means honing and getting efficient as possible in how you run a product process. How do you take, things, the success and support side of the business and sales are learning on the ground with customers and prospective customers and feed that into a roadmap? And how does that flywheel move as quickly as possible? So that takes talent and process. And then go to market, right? How do you actually fully, from me and you scrappily getting in front of customers any way we can to a fully functional go-to-market program and platform and all the resources that are needed to actually bring that to life. And lots of things in between, right? So I touched on success and support, having people in those roles other than myself and you to be really getting that voice of the customer, understanding exactly what's working and what's not with the product. And again, as I said a second ago, feeding that into the roadmap as quickly and efficiently as possible. So long way of saying, the, I guess, trite idea of pouring gas on the fire, but I would say, the little tinder of product market fit to really start to, what's the word? Tinder to...
Like a campfire. We need a campfire at minimum.
Getting to the campfire. Exactly. So having the resources to really be able to do that. And that's what we've been up to behind the scenes now for several months. We closed a financing round. We can talk about who participated in that and some of those pieces, but shortly thereafter it was okay, get to work in now that that's done, which is a process in and of itself. It's a fun component of what it means as being in my seat at this stage. But then getting to work and having a hiring process, having a recruiting process, and so on. So we've been very busy for the past few months.
Yeah, definitely. I do think you should pause to talk about our investors for a moment, just hit that while we're early here. But then I do think, we can go into a little more detail on the team side of this and the product roadmap and the go-to-market. Maybe we can just hit those 3 topics after you share a little bit about the investors.
Yeah, so we have great investors, Social Leverage, a firm called Blank Ventures, that and several others that have participated previously and then participated in this Series A round, which was led by a firm called Portage that was sort of in our network, in particular through Social Leverage, who connected us. And so it's been very nice to have, in general, very like-minded investors. In particular, it's kind of the main point I want to convey, that actually understand what we are doing. understand what we are doing, but understanding how it fits into what I would argue is one of the more complicated, confusing industries in terms of what the services are in this industry, how businesses are structured in this industry, what the regulatory environment is in this industry, the different types of companies in this industry. If you don't know that well, it's really hard to have a synergistic relationship with an investor or any sort of partner, because it is so complicated. And so I would say our investors really get it. It's been a pleasure to, have obviously the actual fundraising conversations with these folks, and then, on the other side of that, be partners with, is the money is key. But having good partners that actually understand what we're doing and again, the space that we're doing it in. And I would argue, not to spend too long on the negative, but that is, I'll say, not always the case in, in sort of VC world, investing or attempting to invest in this space. And we've kind of seen examples of where that doesn't work out so well. So, again, we're thrilled that we have the partners we have and continuing to grow with them.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about team, because I'm building out of a team that can move quickly on product and go to market and iterate quickly is a critical component. And I always talk about how important team is. So I want to get into this a little bit. Like, this is like a fundamental thing that you need if you're really going to grow the way that we want to grow over the next few years. So maybe we should talk about that. There's just so many things. There's the hiring piece, I think, which has taken a ton of time. I do think behind the scenes, it's been a huge effort, internally for us, especially for me and you. I think we were both involved in every hire, like in the process for every hire. So it was a lot of time, and we did have to divert attention away from growth activities for a period of time to get the people in the seat and also onboarded. But maybe talk about that, like from the founder's seat. I know it came with some tension, I will say. Like, we'll just call it out. It definitely comes with tension because it's like, on the one hand, you raise this money, you want to immediately go grow. But on the other hand, you have to pause for a second and get the right people in the right seats to enable that growth. And it can be hard. I think both of us would rather be in front of it. Like, we want to be out there. We want to be moving things forward. We want to be spreading the word. But pausing to do the rebrand and hire the right people, I think, for a short period of time was lots of learnings, lots of fun, but also challenging, for sure.
Yeah, just in terms of, I do think, growth at all costs is very much waning in terms of a mindset among investors, among startups. You need to grow quickly. You need to become a big business. That is the underlying premise. But if you're doing it without a stable foundation, that's less interesting these days. You need to be able to ultimately get to become a profitable company, continue to grow hopefully forever. And I think that was, our mindset was we know what the foundation needs to look like. So it's not like you go into raising money and then figure out at that point what to do with it. Yeah, what to do with it from a hiring standpoint. We had very clear plans around what parts of the business, what roles with what talent from a skill set standpoint do we need to fill that will truly give us the most leverage, take things off my plate, your plate, so that you and I can go do the things we need to do, but also in general give us the most leverage to get to sustainable growth. And so we kind of had that playbook written, right? We didn't go into, closing a round of financing and trying to figure it out at that point. So then it was the sprint, to your question. How do you then, okay, we need to fill these roles, and I touched on them a minute ago, but things like a customer success role, things like a sales role, you and I were doing product management. So how do you make sure functions around that product process, product design, obviously engineering? What am I missing?
RevOps, like just the go-to-market, like the foundation, building the foundation of that, since it's really just been me and you chatting and reaching out to people with no clear metrics or process
marketing
or tools.
So
Marketing is a huge thing.
RevOps. So we knew what we needed to do in general. It obviously evolved a little bit over, a couple months in the process. But with that blueprint, then that is, as you were just saying, kind of only the beginning. We then need to, who's helping us recruit? Where are we recruiting from? What are we screening for? What are we not screening for across different roles? What is the interview process? How does all of this, you said it a second ago, pull my time away, your time away? At this stage, everything's whack-a-mole. So if I'm running an interview process for, we went from, I think, 7 people to 20, if that's right, something like that. So hiring 12, 13, maybe 14 people or so in a 2-ish month window, and I'll say in hindsight, we very much learned that it was going to take more of our capacity than I think you and I even expected. So yeah,
because we were very picky. So shout out to the team who's here, and shout out to the people who have helped us along the way with recommendations, recruiting, because it was quite a journey. But I think we learned in the seed round, we have done hiring here, and we knew the type of person we needed at this stage.
Why don't we talk about what that is? Because I think
person, like the type of person.
What, not specific to roles, but what were we looking for? Like, shout out to everybody who's now here, but like, why was it in our view sort of a gauntlet? What was so important that we were actually looking at?
Well, there's the role specifics, so technical, like competency and whatever they're bringing to the table. That's supposed to be kind of a skill that they're uniquely bringing. That's important, and we do focus on that, of course. But I think that it just became very clear. There were a few hires that we made early on where it just became clear that the stage fit was not right necessarily. Like our stage, it sounds good to work at a startup. Like a lot of people think they would like to work at a startup, but a startup that's this early, seed stage, Series A, it's a lot different than working at like a Series C plus company, even a Series B plus company, because you have to be very, very comfortable with gray area, with nuance, with changing directions and priorities and pivoting, with high pressure situations. Just the comfort and the design, not even comfort, but that should excite you as a person if you're going to work in this stage of growth at a startup. And I think we were making sure that we were really careful with a combination of things. I also think the level was very important in terms of which roles do we need someone who can be strategic, like step into a more strategic role and do the work for a period of time and eventually build a team. Because there were multiple instances of that where there's a stage fit issue, culture fit, just generally speaking with what we're trying to build, belief in our mission and vision. But then also, can they play in this space where you have to build something and you have to be able to be strategic and do project management and all of that stuff and do the thing while you're building it and eventually work yourself out of a role, potentially, where you're layering people under you as growth continues. So that's hard to find. And we talked to a lot of amazing people. And in some roles, we had multiple awesome candidates. And it was really about honing in on who is the best fit for us right now. You know what I mean? So it's not to say that there weren't a lot of good candidates. There were. It's just more so to say who is the best fit for, and some of it was shifting based on other people we brought in. So as it relates to like engineering, product, like a lot of times as you're building this, who you hire first somewhat tweaks maybe the very specific skill sets or experience that you're looking for in a role that's complementing that role, because resources are just limited and you're not going to hire 40 people right now. We're only hiring like 12. You know what I mean?
I would also say like the interview process itself sometimes helps fine tune the role.
Yeah, what you're looking for sure. If you've never hired the role, for sure. At least talking to like 5 highly qualified candidates, because you're going to learn about the role just talking to highly qualified people.
I'll say too, last thing is, the constant debate over a 2.5, 3 month period is that trade-off between scrutiny and speed.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Can we really spend one more week interviewing for XYZ role? Or is
Yeah.
the very fact that no one's in that seat really the primary issue? And it was constant, debate of that trade-off for every role. But I still have conviction, I think you do too, that having the dream team, like actually spending the time and having this level of scrutiny is actually part of what moves the needle.
Yeah.
What will actually make we need the best product. We need to sell to the right customers. We need to grow the business. But I think in our view, the way to do that, it's sort of ironic in how, or it's so obvious to even say it, but I do think it's often overlooked, is to have a really, really good team and good culture that helps move the team forward. And that's a constant work in progress on the culture side of things. But
before we even raised the money in our strategy write-up, it very clearly said that we believe that the best teams build the best products, and we have to be willing to spend money on not just being their salaries and what they cost to bring in, but the money to recruit them and to take a pause and spend so much spend resources on just vetting. I think for some roles we ended up talking to like 20 people, at least 20 people. And so I think that like being committed to that was hard. There were multiple times where one of us was like, like, please, like, let's just pick them. I know there was that little red flag, but like, let's just do it. Like, we got so far. We're so desperate. But I think just like staying true to that commitment, I think it's already paying off, but I do think it will continue to pay off because those people will be the people building the teams that are to come. You know what I mean?
How many times did Batnick's quote of, if it's not an obvious yes.
If it's not an obvious yes, it's a no. I know. Shout out to Michael Batnick.
Yeah.
For saying that, because if it was just us saying that to each other, which we have many times, not in those words, we said that before the Batnick episode, but Batnick saying that was basically like, yep, we gotta do this. We gotta do this right, but it's hard.
So
it's hard when you're in it.
Thanks, Michael, for slowing us down. All right. What else? What else do we need to cover on this?
Well, I think a little bit about the roadmap. So what are we building here would be helpful. If you're a new listener and you're not as familiar with what we're doing here at Seeds, maybe just a high level on that and why did we hire all these people to bring it to market and to build it?
What I'm excited about in the brand is one of the key points I think it makes is that advisors already know what we're saying. In that when it comes to investment management, telling complexity stories about how you're building portfolios, the products you're using, how many CFAs you have on staff is not what drives good customer experience or how your customers perceive your value around investment management or your services in general. But technology hasn't sort of broken them out of that narrative. If you're going to make investment management truly customer centric, meaning understand an investor in a deeper way, and then based on that understanding, do something about it in the form of a personalized portfolio and how you talk about that portfolio, you need a lot of guardrails and connection points to do that. And obviously the premise is we didn't think that it exists. And so that at a very high level is what we're building. Advisors know that if they make investment management customer centric, their value will be more highly understood and perceived. The experience will be much better for the customer. So the technology is going to allow them to bring that to life in the form of deeper assessment experience. How do you actually understand who an investor is beyond their quote unquote risk tolerance number? I want to know who this person is and how they think and what's important to them and what their values are and what their preferences are. I need a way to actually do that. I need technology to support me in creating that moment and gathering that information. And then if I do that, I need to somehow connect that to the next dot, which would be a personalized portfolio. what asset allocation should they actually be in based on their goals and risk and other inputs, as opposed to sort of the finger in the wind of everybody goes in a 60-40. Why am I in an allocation? Why are you saying that this person's in an allocation that truly reflects information that you've just gathered from them? But underneath allocation, everything else, security selection, the underlying building blocks of a portfolio, what are those? How are they bringing those things like values and thematic interests to life? Taxes, all the fun complexity that comes with building portfolios, hopefully the right way for clients. And then again, how do I talk about it? So how would I show that to somebody who's in my office or on a Zoom meeting that's actually going to resonate with who they are as an investor? So we've talked about many times my personal story, and I think many advisors' story of that moment of proposal being, here's 20 pages of metrics, and I go through my script of what's in it and why. How about it being a story about what they told you through that assessment experience?
Mm-hmm.
So connecting all those dots in one product, one platform. And what it does for advisors, we think, again, it's not just sort of the experience side. It's not just the client hopefully perceiving your value more clearly. It's freeing up. The big irony is what we think is not of great of an experience around investment management is actually taking so much time operationally for firms to get from an intro meeting to portfolio implementation and then the ongoing management of portfolios through, let's call them legacy trading systems, different platforms, is so much time spent for little ROI in terms of delivering value and delivering, a positive experience. So we want both sides of that coin. How do you make that experience better? And then, of course, how do you remove the operational burden behind the scenes? You shouldn't be spending time pressing buttons and doing individual trades in customer accounts that your client could care less whether or not you're spending zero time or, 10 hours a week doing things like that.
Yeah, they care that it's getting done. They just don't need you to do it. They don't perceive your value in you being the one to do it. So it is basically building like a TAMP with a much more streamlined, intuitive
TAMPs should
tool.
actually be turnkey. And
an actual turnkey TAMP.
Our opinion is that is often not necessarily the case, in that there's not a connected experience front stage to the customer.
Or even for the advisor.
Or for the advisor. What am I putting on a screen in the form of an assessment, in the form of a proposal, in the form of an implementation moment, in the form of what am I showing in a review meeting, that is actually connecting those dots from beginning to end in the experience? And then again, behind the scenes, why would you possibly be spending time on surfacing these individual trade decisions, figuring out where to raise cash, deciding what random third-party manager to slot into different portfolio management structures? There's so much happening that again is not really a customer-centered process or experience. And again, our thesis, and I think what the brand is hopefully saying, is I think most advisors know that. I think that we as an industry know these things, and it's now just how do you have technology with that helpful nudge to that future state, and obviously that's the goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like then tying it into the brand, you just mentioned this, but basically then this brand, the brand is really, this is the product we're working on right now. This is the set of features we're working on right now. But the rebrand and everything we're doing there is really about kind of saying like, this is what we believe about the future. This is kind of like our vision and mission and the type, and we're trying to attract an advisor who believes the same thing about the future of the industry, believes that we should be doubling down on the human parts of like what makes that human to human connection between the advisor and the client powerful and good, and how can tools enable more of that? So how can your tech stack and how can the platforms that you use, how can those things enable a more human experience, or you to deliver more value to more customers instead of just creating another workflow or another, disconnected tool that basically sits there that you have to figure out how to connect. The tool itself, the tools you use should be enabling you to spend as much time as possible delivering that value that people are seeking, that more consultative, direct human to human stuff and taking away all of the things that are not that, basically, that don't, and still keeping the advisor in the driver's seat, still keeping the advisor as the hero of the story. It's not about getting away from that. It's more about enabling more scale around that human to human connection.
That is because that is the value, right? I think that's what I'm saying is what advisors already know.
Yeah.
In general, we talk about, again, the sort of premise of a financial planning process. When we talk about customer centricity, literally that means your ability to deeply understand the customer and then tell the story that where they are at the center of the story. So if I, for financial planning, have a deep discovery process to understand all these different pain points of your financial and personal life, that's why I'm getting hired. The service is your capability to do financial planning is, of course, table stakes. If you couldn't do that, they, of course, wouldn't hire you. But the real reason, arguably, an advisor is going to get hired over another advisor is their ability to do that first part really well and connect those pain points to the solutions and how they explain those solutions. I understand these things about you and your family and what you're trying to accomplish and what's most important to you and what your values are. Therefore, here's your prescription. You and I have used the analogy a million times of, imagine you walk into a doctor's office and as you're walking in the door, they hand you a prescription. They look at you once and they hand you a prescription. That's not why you would ever want to keep that primary care doctor. The reason, maybe hopefully you have a doctor you like and return to, is because they're going to do the blood work. They're going to spend more than 5 minutes with you understanding what your issues are. They're asking about your family history. The prescription is just becomes the natural thing on the other side that you now feel good about is the thing that's going to address my problem because this human person understands my problem. And again, I think advisors very, very well know that that's why their clients love them and why
because
they stay.
They do it with planning. I think this was the big unlock for me when even talking about the vision over 2 years ago with you, was that I already know that advisors know this, and we've now proved this over the last couple of years, but it's already clear that you know this because you're doing it in planning. Like in the planning process, it is a totally customer-centric experience. The only reason that you may not be doing it on the investment side is because of the history of the industry and what has traditionally, occurred in terms of like product sales and manager selection and all those managers telling you how to pitch those models to try to get more, assets into those models and strategies. But also because there isn't a good, clean way to do it without burdening yourself with operational complexity. And we know that for a fact now because we run into firms all the time who have started to deliver this type of experience. They've created it themselves. They've manually created their own system of identifying what a customer wants, and then they've pieced together different tools and different pieces of the puzzle to support that. And operational complexity is very high, but the experience is going well. And we've met a lot of those firms where they have already figured this out and they already are trying to do what they're doing in planning on the investment side of the business. But there's just not a good tool to support it.
That's it. If you're doing that 3-dimensional understanding on the financial planning side, but then a very 1-dimensional understanding in the investment management piece. Maybe it's a risk tolerance questionnaire. So therefore, your narrative can't be customers. The story you tell by default, if you don't have the inputs, there's no output to say. You just have to use whatever your investment model menu is and how they're built and what products are in them, and tell your story, as opposed to, how would I tell a story that really has this investor at the center of it? Because I know all the things I rattled off earlier. And as you said, there are advisors who have, it's exactly right, who understand this and have done that first part. Wow, I should really ask about these other things. Do you care about these things? What are what's interesting too is, even before you layer in some of what we would say makes this 3-dimensional, so values, thematic interests, and all the sort of subcomponents of those areas, before you even get there, just the financial goals inputs, tax situation, and all the nuance of what accounts do people own already, how much money do they have in different account types, being able to gather that information and tie it to a clear, connected outcome is also a challenge for firms before you even layer in these additional dimensions.
Preferences, yeah.
Right.
Well, and also I think that a lot of times people think they're providing personalization because they have a menu. You know what I mean? But it doesn't really feel that way because the only personalization you can provide is what's on the menu at that moment and what you can operationally support at that moment. And so I do think like the way that we're building this out to have all of these different building blocks allow for, as we continue to build the product, a lot more flexibility in terms of meeting all of those different flavors and variations of needs without the operational burden of it. And it also goes into trade-offs. So when we're talking about all these financial things, like trade-offs are also preferences. They're just financial. Would you rather have closer tracking to the benchmark and take more of a tax hit this year? Or would you like to avoid taxes? And maybe you're not all the way in the model, you're not fully in the model, so therefore you may not track as close to benchmark. Like that's a trade-off, that's a preference. So continuing, I think on our side to understand and pull apart all of these different types of preferences and figure out the best way to enable advisors to quickly communicate that, because we don't expect advisors to be spending hours and hours talking about investments with their clients. It's actually the opposite. It's that you should only be communicating what is necessary to communicate based on their preferences, their needs, the things they care about, the amount of detail they need in order to feel comfortable and to feel like you're really responding to what you've learned about them. So it is a really big problem to solve, which is why, to tie this all back together, because I know we're running short on time, that's why we raise this money, because it's a big problem. And now that we understand it better, there is so much room to deliver value by connecting all of these different dots together, connecting all of these different pieces of the puzzle and all of these steps of the process together on the advisor front and in terms of what the client sees and experiences when they're working with the advisor.
That's it. It's an easy challenge.
It's like just a small, sometimes I do say like, why couldn't you just pick an easier thing and make it sound really good to me so that I would come and work to the easier problem. It's a big, hard problem to solve, but I think that's why we're excited, is because we're onto it and we're in the middle of solving it. And if we can solve it, I do think it'll change the industry, which is exciting.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Plan set. We did it. Episode over. Anything else you want to say about all these changes?
No, I am very excited. I think, just to echo what you just said, we're now in that phase of fully bringing the vision to life. Every day we bring in a customer firm and have these conversations and they express these pain points. It's such a amazing feeling of, wow, okay, this thing we've tapped into, this sort of broader issue, getting that evidence of firms who are really feeling it, and then being able to put technology in their hands that does move the needle. So I think I'm most excited about, like we said at the beginning, you get this glimmer of product market fit and all of this now increasingly clear evidence, and then being able to use these resources to layer in the next step of the product, and then the next step of the product, and the next step of the product, and all of a sudden that really, you get to help these firms in a really tangible way. So that's exciting. And I do believe, and it's why we're here, that this will fundamentally change how advisors think about investment management as a value prop within their business, and really realign it with how they've always known their value is perceived. It's exciting.
It is. Well, on that note, shall we land the plane on the first episode of the new version of the podcast?
We can land the plane. And I guess, new website URL?
New website. You got to give the new website.
So if any of this sounds exciting, we hope it does. Come learn more. New website, www.useseeds.com, and we'll see you next time.